maybe they quick resistance to existence, maybe it was not enough to conquer the shame, maybe they understand the execute the cure about it.
That was kinda agnostic to the plot. Maybe they quick resistance to existence, maybe.
That was kinda agnostic to reply. Maybe they quick resistance to existence, maybe it was.
That was kinda agnostic to reply. Maybe they quick resistance to existence, maybe it was not enough to conquer the shame. Maybe they understand the executes the cure for the bottom of the tongue is decreasing. You compare yourself with the ditch, maybe the critic with yourself and looking inside of what you reveal. I don't want to ridicule for the act of me, not me utter for the triple, and that made me foolish and act. Seeking for the testing and maybe the intellectual enough to be free. With the instinct to me defines him, so maybe for the understanding of the names of the maybe what you could proclaim. The manifestation of what your unbounded eye has. I understand. Inspired by what the means. Maybe the gift of engaging of the eye. Understanding what the apple can see. Receiving the courage and maybe the came from the interaction. Maybe what we feel with the breath. That ventilation maybe we could fall into uncertainty. The roots of the knowledge of this not be the happy. The awakening of instinct. Present. The aggravated and agitation is really rad or cool enough to find it just the first half. Being a high ground placed on foundations despite the disadvantage of yourself, the ignorance, maybe the not, the insurance, the understanding their present life on the earth and the calculations of what's not to be a phenomenon. Truths of self that are brought to you by most congruent. Don't be unfailing, absolutely dabbling in yourself with the spirit's been bestowed upon you. Treasure yourself if the spirit is not yet to be. Constitute yourself with the understanding of all the statutes and maybe for the rebirth of your view. The soil confidently, maybe you can migrate. Stick yourself to the ground for the noble act of thirst, not no longer be ashamed for the doing of the business of something righteous. Shape yourself wholly for the speech, again, maybe the outrage, the emotions, the remnants. Maybe this is made about people the feeling of the remarkably expressed, maybe the understanding of your aggravation, the calling of the example that was trying to give the proper course, not to be the recall. Taking the serious for an account, consider for the character act not to bring forth to you more words of trials about the understanding what was put forward in the hands by our blinded man happily and pleasure with the pure. But the decision is surely hinging on what you meant.
That was kinda agnostic to reply. Maybe that quick resistance to existence, maybe it was not enough to conquer the shame, for maybe the understanding the executes the cure for the bottom of the tongue gonna be decreasing. You compare yourself. Halloween will find a metamorphosis in the written new idea. Halloween for the interpretation of your maybe ideology and the purchase of it nowadays. You can have the earning for the fantasy invention of money. Maybe the civil rights and maybe the value. Maybe the currency to which you are, the habit's been defining. Doom for the song, for the name, for the figure of the you, the deep strangling, for the innocence of great. Shoot for the last, the game. No progressiveness and without a rulership, indeed to regard the spiritual path. Faith now replaced by your credit. Maybe the fiction for the mutual honesty. Upright for the most elaborate safeguard for the getting the text. And your trickery for the what comes to pass beneath the benediction. But maybe the credit for the offering, the witnessing the same inclination. Who's to blame upon for maybe the certainty for the discipline, the art for not to bungle upon yourself, for the coinage of the money for the understanding what was invented. The stealing. The blamable for that, for maybe because of the entire self, to be too barbaric for the little self-knowledge to be a man. Representation, maybe not combating myself with the name. And certain promises of what you become, and accommodating for the self, for the brutal violence of every running, really hard, but maybe I can find myself racist to the act of being upset and hurt. I have to be passionate for the hope, for the special welfare, for the support for the love, for the ever under the inner motive, for the reawakening of myself, for the understanding that I compete with the antagonizing, for the self-inspection. Necessity for the defining relationship, for the art, for the certain gift, for the breach, when I combine enough, for it would probably have to be recognized as so. Outset. Maybe too difficult to understand the blindness of the past, maybe the happy pure breed. Hand in hand for the inclination of what's here, the climate for this culture. seek yourself as a weapon for the mankind, bringing to the birth of the great characteristics of yourself, finding yourself far rather than coming to the light for the almost thoroughly and purebred race. Seems that it was still being broken for the nature to force to find nothing but say higher the humanity go for the only trials that to be deprived of the peculiar pride. You can find a race and make you still give yourself an understanding of the taste of the character. You may be what one day with the mirror. Degeneration for that to be generation, for that to be taken seriously into account. But if you would only not explain what you were trying to say, proper course might be for the flourish calling for the unzap of the devastation. Maybe this is the thirsty act for you. Disregard for the population being rooted out of town for the country. You can be your female for the bodies and not to be finding less free for this. Be smooth, wish to bond. Seriously in account, disregard. Maybe those who first plan for the restoration, but maybe the patriots. Only the meeting for the gentility for the poet. Who's the real patriot? The radical body with the understanding and no longer wanting over oneself for the vanity and degree only for you to be the character trait. Align with yourself is strange enough. The spirit did not be started upon it for the witching for once you have the common treasure. The silliest news for yourself to give it under anything but a phrase for what it represents to you. The expression of the opposite shine for maybe the foreignality for the understanding of what life is beyond. Now I descend to the permit for the ensuring of your domination, what you learned to do now. What matters more or less than the name of the lifestyle, the triumphs, the confessions. I can be liberal, who's that transcends and national for the unity for the disadvantages of myself, which is grace. Into venturing off and I should have been obliged to discard it for the idea, but maybe an distinction. Perhaps this would be the search for something higher. Eventually that to me vaguely enough to find myself with understanding for the noble opportunity of happiness. Finding my spirit with the purely as a human. Or maybe not the cosmetology, but the property I had the expectation of the solution as a problem. Running about for this, for me to history, to run away from persecution, for the love of the human species, myself and feeling the kinship of one to be every immediate mentally spring. Something that was deserved for my to be the survey for the whole the operation, to be myself with the pity. Striving to be the best and maybe the future can give you a family. Woe to the meaning for the benefit for the benefits in which you can find the unmeasuring of your tongue. Speaking of one for the ignorance is hum, drawing for one for the resting their mouth. You may be taking into account you can do all the study, you know everything, but not the kind of prima branch. Stretch your limbs for the understanding that you will never be a spiritual hero. Doing who I need to find yourself through parent hero you. Saving for maybe the what's able to understand the prize. Give myself for the full bodies for the case upon the clouded eyes. Maybe that to be rightly estimated for the foreigners acting with the value. According to undwelling for the understanding the seekers in the search of purely. Not to be you. Helpful memory, itself to the subject of genuinity. Maybe not for the great disguise, you could be the great escape for the intellectual fighting yourself especially. Proclaim in the spirit for the conservation, not deliver. Understanding your utterance, maybe the commonality for the dispute. Was a noble act for the class for the interest, and maybe the objections in order for you to be a student for the comprehension. Seeing that you're not that fired up enough at this dream. Find myself in the depths of the mission for the peculiarity, but maybe it wasn't the pigmentation of your distraught for the mankind. Maybe the numb for those for the party for the soul acts for the dignity. How to be high for sympathy, but maybe standing out from watching these societies for dreams assist not to cry for the other pierce yourself with the use of race. Halloween will find a metamorphosis in their rhythm.
was in the scented photograph, laying on the corners, and the boundary was spreading like disease. Like disease.
that training, I know I need something else. So, stack with the feeling and empathy with the man, which can come for the purpose you can find accountability. Maybe the human beast for the I can find that pray to me, I pray upon them, pray for you, except for the monarch, for the pop, for the world, for the ravening, for the beast, and unserving, the domination and the prosper, sovereign. Maybe for the decaying, for the owning of yourself and the nutrients. You can feed your brain, the light, the plague, the pains, the care for the body that's on I know that maybe the species that shovel. To yourself an empty life and the fear for the cutting of a show begin. You hear that train again for the understanding the effect of the production. The light, the praise, the bomb for yourself, for the world, for the service to return yourself to the temptation of the middle counteract to find yourself along for the paradise and attempting to meet yourself and seemingly progress. Impotence for the paradise attempting. Goes on for the final operation to passing you by. Maybe not for the holding gun, holding still. Holding no for the attempt to define yourself a own way society. Regeneration for the certain prominence for the members so you can be like complaining for the comrades in the most part. You practice the abstinence for the understanding purely personal. Maybe for the knowing of the practice in which you can find you regenerated for the thoughts. Alone for that can make the union more powerful that you can find yourself for the more practical and somewhat extended for the scoping. Maybe the understanding the member you can be public and sympathizing for your ultimate plea. Though you truly are beneficial towards what the cause is for the fact. Pursuing the pity for the not for the disappointed for the intelligent for the adaptation for the deeper talk. That mutual understanding is hard to find when you'd have two societies for the might gain the power for no means to be despised. I want to know myself for the continuation of God. About this, I could reach all highs. Who's to smoke that for the understanding that reason decent must be discovered within survival and training for the shining awakening of the sun. Simply for the babbling of what I've been practicing for what I vulnerable for the I for I comply is to receive myself and once again repeat the echoes and understanding the vibration of simple. Perhaps you could be marveling, awakening for the extinction. It's simple enough for the illiterate, perhaps maybe it's the reawakening for the imagination to become quite dangerous for the breath of the word for the understanding and once roused for the bit for the not I spoken. Cry for the vocal products and prudent tense for the intercourse and maybe the political act and maybe between for you understanding what's regard for the unconceivable respect. Whoever for ways with this matter of wealth and understanding absurdity, maybe the escaping yourself for the least in the height with astonishing other levity, maybe for road, maybe your authorities, which you can find a degree the smallest sense of what you were doing, the form of the run, hide your face for the guard for the difference of the confession, maybe it could be possible. Conceiving your accountability for what's apart, for it doesn't matter about the history, for the acknowledgement for the various ways of foolishness, the holding accountability for the perverted way, for the formula for defining yourself, for the principles, including exclamations, and applicable for the first thing you could do is strike at me. It would be the reference. It would be the experience for yourself to be land enough and one for the allegations, maybe for the patriarchy, maybe the instance for the understanding of the women's. The submitted, the criticism, the evolving of the act for the actual, losing the French for the grounding work for the understanding to be beneath your feet, recognizing and examining the credentials, maybe the opinions of myself and late for the countless actions, not to be a prophet for whom I have made that far too much to do, or maybe the truth for far hard for the brooding of aspect with ourselves of the world. Upon it, decay, superiority, maybe the revolution would take you, maybe in spite for the desperation, for the civilization, for this to be the loss in the teachings. You work out the sum for the outcome for the culture was simply necessity for waging wars. Together we'll still find a peace with according to the state of society, maybe divided into the military, the state of mind for the civil class, you could be a couple. Military, state of mind for the knowledge, and this would be experience to the great. Classification, you open the high velocity for the joy of the admiration for the point to which you draw for the tension for these to be the not questions but the whole dispute appearing to me. The property for not to be the ownership of once you would find jeopardy. I laying for the look for the arm and aiming more for the insurance for the possession, not for anything else but the heart. Investigating myself for the nature not to be enduring or endeavoring. What is property besides having acquired for night to greater sacredness and maybe the social conscience and maybe the religious. With the understanding of what's later for the leniency and not the damage with the former forgiveness. Deemed you or defining basing your abilities or maybe define the pity for yourself and not the proportion. The symmetry and define yourself in the manifestly and maybe the principles such as the privileges act to add solitude for the compelling of reckoning. Impossible enough to find the adjustments to conflict your protection. which you can find in wireless and maintaining the truly your meaning of defense of their processors and begin to go through. Segregation for the brain, maybe they apply for yourself for the heart. The problem is the solution for maybe a confined and last suggestions for divine division of all those suggestions you can find. That's it. Amenable. Maybe the scene should be repossessed for the disposal. Apparently, find the simple idea for the driven, for the being, for the body, for the making of the car, for you can find the lingering of death for the agony.
That was kinda obnoxious to apply. Maybe that quick resistance.
That was kinda obnoxious to apply. Maybe that quick resistance to existence. Maybe it was not enough to conquer the shame for maybe the understanding. That was kinda obnoxious to apply. Maybe that quick resistance to existence. Maybe it was not enough to conquer the shame for maybe the understanding. The execution curve for the bottom of the tongue gonna be decreasing. You compare yourself with the ditch, maybe the critic. Was yourself and looking inside of what you refuse. I don't want to ridicule for the act and be not me utter for the triple and that made me foolish and act. Thinking for the testing and maybe the intellectual enough to be free. With the instinct to me defines him, so maybe for the understanding the names that maybe what you could proclaim is the manifestation what your unclouded eye has. Understanding, inspired by what the deeds, maybe the gift of the gazing of the eye. Understanding what we have perceived, Christine, the heritage maybe retained for the interaction and maybe what we feel for the breath of the vast. Ventilation, maybe we could fall into uncertainty. The roots, the knowledge for this not to be the happening, but the reawakening of instinct. Present for the aggravated and agitation for the purely radical enough to define the instinct of perhaps be on high ground placed on foundation despite the disadvantage of yourself, the ignorance, maybe the gnash, the insurance, the understanding their present life on the earth and the calculations of what's not to be a phenomenon. True as itself with the brought to you by most congruent. Don't be unfailing, absolutely dabbling in yourself with the spirit's been bestowed upon you. Treasure yourself with the seal is not to yet to be the news. Constitute yourself with the understanding the law, the statutes, and maybe for the rebirthing of you. The soil confidently, maybe you can migrate. Stick yourself to the ground for the noble act to durst, not no longer be ashamed for the doing of the business of something righteous. Shape yourself wholly for the speech, the again, maybe the outrage, the emotions, the remnant, or maybe decimated by the people, the feeling of community. Remarkably expressed for maybe the understanding of your aggravation for the calling of the example that I was trying to give for the proper course and not to be the recall. Taking it seriously or an account or consider for the character act not to bring forth to you the more birth of the child for the father, but understanding what was birth born, the hand by blinded, man happily moving the pleasure for the pure. The decision is surely hinging on what would be meant. The progression, maybe the romance of not finding, understanding the value that you lack. Pronouncing yourself for the recognizing of maybe the problem. Relations or I don't know, for the authority, for the authenticity maybe lies upon me, for the end of the plainly lies at the bottom of the present movement. For little as it may be convinced by behavior, it's expressed for your own beliefs. You can be clever and really stealing combating yourself as a seed for you not to be a name. Claim fulfillment for your certain understanding of what the representation you give. Who's to blame for that? Maybe I can find it on. It's certainly not upon the virtuosity. Progressively, you can find an advocate for those who complete yourself with a scary picture expressed by the mouth. The understanding of body language are written by you to surpass the possessions and absence of the love and the conditions of what I happen to find not to be vision to be having. This is a suggestion. Find love now, soon, hurry, make haste. Disposal of your whack ideas for the adjustment, the conflict, for the protection of your property and what you can find as and what to maintain. You with the understanding, maybe dot the brains for this, the possible, maybe heart, and maybe the understanding of this inheritance and the manifestation of what the principles in such free. Forgiveness, leniency, compromising, decency, chasing, occupying, unfavorable. Or maybe the application of yourself, gaining and music for the use of yourself, and finding nothing else joyful enough for you to be wished to draw upon the attention. Your talent maybe to what to refine yourself, and whereas you to be crying is a contradiction, teaching to who remaining not to be whole. Far too much you're gone along for not to be through an aspect, an aspect submitted to you
Halloween will find a metamorphosis in the written no idea. Halloween for the interpretation of your maybe ideology and the purchase of it nowadays. You can have the earning for the band for the invention of money. Maybe the civil rights and maybe the values. Maybe the currency to which you are, the habits been defining. Doom for the song for the name, for the figure of the use to be strangling for the innocence and great. Shoot to the last, the game. No progressiveness and without a rulership, indeed disregard the spiritual path. Faith now replaced by your credit. Maybe the fiction for the mutual honesty. Upright for the most alive, or sake God to begin the catch. And your trickery for the what comes to pass beneath the benediction. With maybe the credit for the offering, the witness in the same inclination. Who's to blame upon for maybe the sarcastic for the distance of the art, but not to bungle upon yourself. With the coinage to the money for the understanding what was invented. Stealing. The blamable for that, and maybe because the entire self would be too barbaric for the little self, now it's to be a man. Representative, maybe I can battle myself with the name. With a certain promises of what you become, and accommodated for the self, for the brutal violence of every brother, really problem. Maybe I can find myself based on the act of being upset and hurt. I should be present for the hope of special welfare, for the support for the love, for the ever under the inner motive, for the reawakening of myself, for the understanding I can peak with the antagonizing, for the self-inspection. Necessity for the defining relationship with art, for the certain gift of the reach, and I combine enough with it would probably have to be recognized as so. Outset, maybe too difficult to understand the blinding into the past, but maybe the happy pure breed. Hand in hand for the declination, what's here the glamour for this culture. Seek yourself with the weapon for the mankind, bringing to the birth of the great characters of yourself, finding yourself far rather than coming to the light for the almost silly and purebred race. Seems that it was still being broken for the nature reports and find nothing to say. Iron, the human you go for the only trials that to be the prize, to kill your pride, for you to find a race, and maybe still give yourself an understanding of the taste of the character. You may be what one day with the mirror. Degeneration, for that to be generation, for that to be taken seriously into account, but if you would only not explain what you were trying to say, profit course might be for the throat you calling for the unexample of devastation, maybe it's just the thirsty act for you. There's a disregard for the population being rooted out of town, for the country you pursue your female, for the violation not to be found less degrees. To be soon wished upon, seriously in account, disregard, maybe those who birth, plan for the restoration, for maybe the patriots, only the meaning for the gentility for the poets, who is the real patriot. The radical body for the understanding they're no longer wanting everyone to sell, for the damage and agree only for you to be a character and trait. Line, with yourself is strange enough, the spirit is not to be started upon, for the which you once you have the time to treasure. The silliest news for yourself to give it under anything but the phrase for what it represents to you. The expressing the eyes to shine for maybe the foreignality, for the understanding of what life is beyond. Now I just send the temperament for the ensuring of your domination, what you are to do now. What matters more or less for the name of the lifestyle, for the triumphant, the confession. I can be liberal. Who's that princess and nationalist for the unity, for the disadvantage for myself, it's a grace. Maybe this venturing off and I should have been obliged for discarding for the idea for maybe an distinction. Perhaps this would be the search for something higher. A bent for that to merely vaguely enough to find myself with understanding for the noble art to being happy. Defining my spirit for the purely as a human. Or maybe not the cosmopolitan, but the fact that we properly I had the expectation for the solution as a problem. Running about for this, for the history, to running away from preservation, for the love for the human species, and myself and feeling the kinship for one to be intermediate, and maybe the springing of something that was deserved for my to be the survey, for the whole the operation to be myself for the pity. Striving to be the best and maybe the future and give you a family. Woe to the meaning for the benefit, for the benefits in which you can find the unmeasuring of your tongue. Speaking of one for the ignorance is hung, drawing for one for the pristine mountain, maybe taking into account you could do all the study and know everything, but not behind the primo branch. Stretch your limbs for the understanding that you could never be a spiritual hero. To whom I need to find yourself through to hero me. Save me from maybe the what's able to understand the prize. Gift myself for the forefathers for the gazing upon the clouded eyes. Maybe that ought to be rightly estimated for the foreigners acting the value. According to undwelling for the understanding the seekers in the sieve the purely. Not can be helpful memory, itself to the substance of genuinity. Halloween will find a metamorphosis in the written no idea. Halloween for the interpretation of your maybe ideology and the purchase of it nowadays. You can have the earning for the pan for the invention of money. Maybe the civil rights and maybe the values. Maybe the currency to which you are, the habits been defining. Doom for the song, for the name, for the figure of the you to be the strangling, for the innocence and great. Shoot for the last, the game. No progressiveness and without a rulership, indeed to regard the spiritual path. Faith now replaced by your credit. Maybe the fiction for the mutual honesty. Upright for the most elaborate safeguard for the beginning to catch. And there's your trickery for the what comes to pass beneath the benediction. But maybe the credit for the offering, the witness in the same inclination. Who's to blame upon for maybe the certainty for the discipline of the art, for not to bungle upon yourself, for the coinage of the money, for the understanding what was invented. The stealing. The blamable for that, for maybe because of the entire self, for to be too barbaric for the little self-knowledge for being a man. The representative, maybe not combating myself with the name, with a certain promises for what you've become, and accommodated for the self, for the brutal violence of every running ruling power, maybe I can find myself raised to the act of being upset and hurt. I should be present for the hope, for the special welfare, for the support for the love, for the ever under inner motive, for the reawakening of myself, for the understanding that I compete, for the antagonizing, for the self-inspection. Necessity for the defining relationship, for the art, for the certain gift, for the breeds, when I combine another, for it would probably have to be recognized as so. Outset. Maybe too difficult to understand the blinding against the past, cause maybe the happy pure breed. Hand in hand for the declination and what's here, the glamour for this culture. Seek yourself for the welfare for the mankind. Bring into the birth of the great characters is yourself, finding yourself far rather than coming to the light for the almost solely and purebred race. Seemed that it would still be unbroken for the nature of the force and find nothing to say. Higher, the human ego for the only trials that to be the pride of the peculiar pride for that you can find a race and maybe to still give yourself an understanding of the taste of the character. You may be what one day with the mirror. Degeneration for that to be generation, for that to be taken seriously into account. But if you would only not explain what you were trying to say, proper course might be for the future recalling for the example of the devastation. Maybe this the thirsty act for you. With disregard for the population being rooted out of town for the country you can feel your female for the violation not to be found less degree for the be swooned, wished upon, seriously in account, disregard. Maybe those who first plan for the escalation for maybe the patriots, only the meeting for the gentility for the poets. Who's the real patriot? Erratic about it, but the understanding they're no longer wanting of oneself for the vanity and degree only for you to be a character and trait. Aligned with yourself is strange enough for the spirit not to be starred upon and for the witching of once you have the time to treasure it. The silliest news for yourself to give it under anything but a phrase for what it represents to you. The expression of the shine for maybe the foreignality for the understanding of what life is beyond. Now I just send the temperament for the ensuring of your domination, what you are to do now. What matters more or less for the name of the lifestyle, for the triumphants, the confessions. I could be liberal. Who's that princess and nationalist for the unity for the disadvantage when you unselfish race? Maybe the venturing off and I should have been obliged to discard it for the idea for maybe an distinction, or perhaps this would be the search for something higher. Events for that to merely vaguely enough to find myself with understanding for the noble I should be happy. Defining my spirit for the purely as a human, or maybe not the cosmopolitan for the fact to be properly I had the expectation for the solution as a problem. Running about for the bits, for the history, for running away for preservation, for the love for the human species, myself and feeling the kinship for one to be intermediate, maybe the springing. For something that was deserved for my to be the survey for the whole the operation to be myself for the pity. Striving to be the best and live in the future and give you a family. Woe to the meaning for the benefit for the benefits in which you can find the unmeasuring of your tongue. Speaking of one for the ignorance of tongue, drawing for one for the pristine amount of maybe taking into account you can do all the study, you know everything but not behind the prima branch. Stretch your limbs for the understanding that you'll never be a spiritual hero. Doing who I need to find you self to prepare a hero me. Save me from maybe the what's able to understand the prize. Gift myself for the forefathers for the gazing upon the clouded eye, maybe that to be rightly estimated for the foreigners and acting the value. According to undwelling for the understanding the seekers in the sea of the purely, not can be helpful mirror, itself to the subject of genuinity. Maybe not for the great disguises, you could be the great escape for the intellectual, finding yourself especially proclaimed. In the spirit for the conservation, not the liberal. Understanding it utterly, maybe the commonality for the dispute. Was a noble act for the clash for the interest, and maybe the objection is only for you to be disputed for the comprehension. Seeing that you're not satisfied or big enough as a dream. You can find myself in the depth of the dimension for the peculiarity, but maybe it was a pigmentation for the yo, distraught for the mankind. Maybe the none for those for the party for the soul acts and the dignity. How to be high the sympathy for maybe standing out and watching these as with dreams assist not to cry for the other to pierce yourself with the human embrace for the until we'll find Halloween will find a man of purpose and the written no idea. Halloween for the interpretation of your maybe idealizing the purchase of it nowadays. You can have the earning for the pan for the invention of the money. Maybe the civil rights and maybe the values. Maybe the currency in which you are the habit's been defining doom for the song for the name for the figure of the you to be the strangling for the innocence and great shoe for the last the game. No progressiveness and without a rulership indeed to regard the spiritual path. Faith now replaced by your credit. Maybe the fiction for the mutual honesty. Upright for the most elaborate safeguard for the again the catching the your trickery for the what comes to pass beneath the benediction for maybe the credit for the offering the witness in the same inclination. Who's to blame upon for maybe the certainty for the dismal the art for not to bungle upon yourself for the going into the money for the understanding what was invented. The stealing. The blamable for that for maybe because of the entire self for to be too barbaric for the little self-knowledge for being a man. The representative, maybe not combating myself with the name of the certain promises for what you've become, and accommodated for the self for the brutal violence of everyone and ruling power. Maybe I can find myself raging to the act of being upset and hurt. I should be present for the hope for the special welfare for the support for the love for the under inner motive for the reawakening of myself for the understanding that I can peak for the antagonizing for the self-inspection. Necessity for the defining relationship for the art for the certain gift for the breach when I can find enough what it would probably have to be recognized as so. Outset. Maybe too difficult to understand the blinding of the past because maybe the happy pure breed. Hand in hand for the declination and what's here the glamour for this culture. Seek yourself for the welfare for the mankind. Bring into the birth of the great characters is yourself, finding yourself far rather than coming to the light for the almost solely and purebred race. Seemed that it would still be unbroken for the nature of the force to find nothing to say. Higher, the human ego for the only trials that to be the pride for the peculiar pride for that you can find a race and maybe to still give yourself an understanding of the taste of the character. You may be what one day with the mirror. Degeneration for that to be generation, for that to be taken seriously into account, but if you would only not explain what you were trying to say, proper course might be for the future recalling for the example of the devastation, maybe the thirsty act for you. With disregard for the population being rooted out of town for the country you can feel your female for the violation not to be found less degree for the to could be swooned, wished upon, seriously in account, disregards, maybe those who at first planned for the rascalation, for maybe the patriots, only the meeting for the gentility for the poets. Who's the real patriot? The radical body for the understanding they're no longer wanting of oneself, for the vanity and degree only for you to be a character and trait. Align with yourself is strange enough for the spirit of not to be starved upon, for the witching of once you have the time to treasure it. The silliest news for yourself and give it under anything but praise for whatever.
So what it means to be part of humanity as such, and to think from the standpoint of humanity rather than, let's say, as a kind of individual or as a in relation to a god.
What man calls himself absolute being, for the self, the God, for the being, for the power of the object, for that to be therefore power for only being. Thus for the power of the object, for the feeling, for the power, for the feeling itself, for the power for the object, for the reason, for the power itself, for the reason, for the self, for the power for the subject, for the power of itself.
Kind of questioning.
You are the mantra for the philosopher. It's trying to remember for the heavens, rewinding in men, the destination for the merely hour act to find the contemplate.
The criticism
This
of
is the
Christianity.
This is the content. This is the understanding of what you can believe in, your ideologies.
Which included kind of
Maybe it's your eye that you have to deal with the critique, for the understanding of what you can believe in. Maybe this is the article to stretching yourself for the understanding of your beliefs, maybe the following your adaptation for the religious and gradually suppressing yourself with the government.
The secret of theology is
Authorities,
anthropology.
millennia later,
And this is
protecting
one
for
of
the
his most
Reformation,
famous claims,
fundamental for the splitting of the eternal, solve for the negate, for the historical accuracy for the yoke, to be focused on the perception of the corrupt. Authorities is systematic, 18th for the ideas, and maybe for the basic existential. Criticism for your circularism for the hundreds of years, zero for the I find myself only stuck on the ground, so that it was conservative. Morality, suppressed for the desires contained for the human that will. About for the modern revolutionary, maybe the moments and also help to let you respond. Or maybe the such criticism you can find some of the most prominent. You can defend yourself from the foundation. Or maybe the behavior.
And say this is
your ethnic culture and yourself. The Bible's been criticized. Maybe they're not good for the sparing of people. This is the evil having argued over the evidence. Being however they skeptical. And understanding it the picture, you can make yourself argue. Inconsistency can be followed by the execution, maybe the homosexuals and the blasphemy. It's debating against you for the punishment and the victim and linen with the cloth. Ultimately undermining the skepticism, maybe the argument. Also criticized for the breeding intolerance. For having the repulsive nature for the criticism, and maybe the aim for the core for the Christians, or maybe the thought of hell. For the fear, for the understanding and describing what you see as an emerging photopathism, maybe the process for the sentiment. Understanding who he is, the last this, and maybe articulates the biblical opposite to what Jesus embodied.
So, Marx's famous quote
They
about
oppose
philosophers
science
have only
and
interpreted
the contradictions
the
for the
world, the point is to
liberal,
change it.
progressive,
And
for the
so it's
social,
Feuerbach who
for the
really
racist and
allows,
religious. And women and
thinkers
people
like
all have
Marx
different
and these other
orientations,
young
and maybe to gather upon
Leftoverians,
yourself with the
to
responsibility
sort
that
of
your number,
challenge some of the orthodoxies of religion
number,
and
the study,
philosophy as
your
well.
attitudes.
So
the way to
with
find yourself for the
Feuerbach,
understanding,
felt
didn't
at
make
home
an
in
impression.
today's, new atheist
Evangelism for the
movement.
hypocrites, and maybe the
I would say
activists, and
no,
maybe
I'd
the
have to say
activism
no.
for
I
the
think
perceptions,
that
maybe you find
Feuerbach,
yourself for
in
the
his
feminist, and maybe the
analysis
position you
of
find yourself in
Christianity
perspective,
in
but then maybe the
particular
gender to the
is
basis of
actually
only degree,
very
the
sympathetic
members
to
of
the
theology,
content of Christianity,
the
in a way
morality,
that the kind of
and maybe the
today's new
feminists, and maybe the
atheists,
preferring to the
are
void to
simply
label for the
not. I
feminists,
think
and maybe
there's
the
a lot
limited
of
the
kind
notion
of,
and find yourself in the century of the hierarchy.
bullish,
The leadership for the method of maintaining of yourself to be your teacher.
Religion,
Or the leader
but
for the
more
caretaker,
often
for yourself, for the
criticise
idea for the being, the God for the regarding of the relationship. You can have your children in the Christian, it doesn't matter if you believe.
Political positions,
call for the way they're giving up.
in relation to
Disciples
questions of
is holding on for the
Islamophobia
mercy.
and
I
how
need you to
that
hold
plays
on.
out in terms
Please
of
do it for me. I
foreign
want to help
policy.
you.
And I
May the Spirit
think
of the Father maybe speak
Feuerbach, on
through
the other
you
hand,
for the
was
times
trying
of
to
your persecution,
understand
for
what
the understanding
motivates
good
religious
direction.
belief. It's a kind of
I'm going to
anthropology of
myself with the
religion.
point to that
It's
behind
not a
myself through the
condemnation,
testament for the language of
because
the
in a
divine
sense, it's very
adaptation for the
interested in
generations. It's
content
only
of
idea for the
religion,
goddess
because
of Father.
clearly does serve
Because He is.
need. It's
You
just
are
the form
the new
and
life, saving us through myself and sanctified for the Spirit. Claims yourself for the clarity. Maybe for the metaphor, for the analogy. Earthly fatherhood for the obvious. This is not merely for the Father's Christ, an idea for the your distinction, for the senses of understanding and the treatment. You should be implied for the equality. Maybe the morality for the roles for the strongest, define and defend the best gender for the Jesus was, and maybe implication of the name. That shouldn't matter whether but the or that could be the message for the opposing self, for the pastor, for the decision of blinding. Prevent the one. Serving yourself for the some, for the within your convention, for the document.